Hello, evolutionary astrologers, and everyone who is on a conscious evolutionary journey. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Nura, and today I'm going to share about Jupiter, basically who he is, what he does, and how, when he does it, and why Jupiter is important for goal setting. Since Jupiter stays roughly the same for about a year, it's really helpful for those sort of medium term goal settings, right? We're not thinking, okay, our 10-year plan when we're talking about Jupiter. It's usually this immediate, okay, I'm trying to plan about a year out. What kind of goals do I have? How do I want to expand? These are Jupiter themes. How do I want to grow? What do I want to learn about? How do I want to connect with my higher self? Because Jupiter is our higher self aspirations, how we open. And so a few things will be important to know before we dive any further is where do you have the transition of Pisces into Aries in your chart? Because that's predominantly where Jupiter is over the next 12 months or so. And also, a general layout of your chart, kind of where do you have planets perhaps in the other mutable signs, because the squares are always going to add a little bit extra of the creative tension. So just to have a layout in general of your chart, I think will be really useful to just have on hand while we dive into some of this. So just starting off with Jupiter, who is he? Jupiter is our higher self aspirations, how we expand, how we open. And where you have Jupiter in your chart is going to show you, so natally, what your process of expansion looks like. And so here you're taking into account the sign, the degree within that sign, right? So typically if it's from 0 to 10 or so, you're kind of in the beginnings, you're learning a little bit more about that sign and that function and how that archetype is really moving through some of the opening journey of really expanding through that energy. If it's in the second 10 degree, so 10 to 20 degrees, you're kind of in like the bulk, I would say, of like a lot of the lessons are coming in. And then the third 10 degree section, so about 20 to 29 degrees, they are where you're really coming into a lot of mastery around that particular archetype. And so I think it's also important to note everything in evolution is spiral. So even if you have something that's like at a 0 degree, it doesn't mean you're completely brand new with that energy, but I think it means you're doing something brand new with that energy. So if you have anything in the earlier degrees, it doesn't mean that you don't know about how to use it. It's just you're maybe on a different part of the spiral. So you're either perhaps opening in a cycle or completing a cycle. And I think this is also dependent on in what way, because we are multidimensional beings. You can look at the different planetary pairs. So what's Jupiter doing with Saturn? What's Jupiter doing in comparison to your moon, in comparison to your sun? So all of these aspects are going to show these different phasal relationships and different ways that Jupiter is going to manifest in our chart. Same thing with the houses. So if you have Jupiter angular, so whether that's first house about the self, fourth house, your core identity, your roots, seventh house, how you relate with other people and sort of who you become and what you give and take, that sort of relationship, sort of values, contrast in the seventh house. And then the 10th house, career and contribution to society, those tend to be when you're going to experience Jupiter the strongest. So if you have Jupiter in the 4th, 10th, or 1st or 7th house, you tend to be seen for your Jupiterian energy. If you have Jupiter in the 2nd or 8th or the 5th or 11th houses, those are the succedent houses. Those are where we're really working on the mastery of some sort of craft, where we're really honing in on the very particular skills and gifts and how we're sharing those gifts and then disseminating them, sharing them out in the world in those succedent houses. So they might sometimes be seen and known by others, but most importantly, in my view, it's really that refining of the craft and just becoming really good at something. And then when you have Jupiter in the 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 12th houses, the cadent houses, I really view this as you're reflecting, you're kind of dismantling everything. You're looking at all the different kinds of information that are coming to you and then using that Jupiter energy to expand and look at, okay, what is true here? How does this correlate with my beliefs? And then how will it in the future shift how I act and who I become? So that's how I really view Jupiter in the cadent houses. And so we'll go into all of these a little bit deeper later when we talk about Jupiter through the houses. But just to give you an idea of your natal Jupiter and how then, so you can sort of have that anchored and tethered, how does your natal Jupiter relate with the transiting Jupiter? That's also going to give us a lot of information. Okay, so like I mentioned before, Jupiter expands everything. Jupiter is like a magnifying glass. So it's really helpful to view Jupiter as a guide to help us to get clearer in terms of our most true goals, our most true aspirations. And that's why he's known as this great benefic, because he can really help you expand in your goals when you're really aligned with yourself. What a lot of people don't consider or don't always consider, and I'm definitely guilty of this too. I had a really wild Jupiter transit this past year that totally gave me a new appreciation of Jupiter transits, is that we tend to expect Jupiter to always be associated with like rainbows, bunnies, kittens, manifesting. You're going to get everything you want because he's like Santa Claus and he's awesome. And I think there's, some of that in relation to Jupiter, but I think also he's just magnifying what is going on in that area of your life so that you can really get clear and create some goals with soul and really start to notice, oh, there's this magnification perhaps of this problem or this situation or this relationship or this dynamic or this way that I am acting or behaving or this focus that I have. And then I get to decide, is this serving me? Is this actually something that on the soul level I really came here to do and really came here to focus on? And typically, if it is aligned with your soul, it will be so beneficial. It will expand marvelously. I really do believe that we are divinely supported to do what we came here to do. On the other hand, if you're starting to notice, okay, this problem just got really big and all of a sudden, it's sort of magnifying something that, oh, this isn't actually aligned with who I am and what I really want. And you start to get into that internal processing of, the connection with what you're really here to do on the soul level. I think you're going to find that out too. So Jupiter can magnify things that are good and bad and everything in between, just so that we can look at it and so that we can make decisions from a place of clarity and higher self integrity. So in Pisces, this is where I think it's going to get really fun for a lot of people, particularly after having Jupiter in Aquarius for the past year, and then that Jupiter-Saturn great conjunction. That's Jupiter's taken on a very Saturnian energy. So I think we've all witnessed the expansion of some, societal issues, and then perhaps our connection to that, depending on where you've had this, Aquarius in your chart over the past year, 2021. And so then when we're thinking about 2022, Jupiter's predominantly in Pisces. He's going to move into Aries and then retrograde back into Pisces and then officially enter Aries at the end of 2022. So we're working predominantly with this end degree of Pisces. When we have that retrograde period, it's going to be the later degrees of Pisces. And so towards the beginning of the year, we're going to get these beautiful tastes of, well, what is our connection with Pisces? Jupiter's going to expand it. He's going to make it bigger. How do you relate with that archetype? Do you have personal or outer planets in Pisces? Are you somebody who naturally has a proclivity to do inner work or not? When confronted with the challenges of life, do you tend to run away from them or tend toward escapism? And there's a whole manner of different ways that we can escape. Another way to look at this is like, are you living in a fantasy? Not that I knock that. I do think that a healthy dose of fantasy and imagination can really keep us sane, right? Especially with all the very fascinating issues going on in the world. But do you tend to get like stuck in fantasy? Is there any potential of delusion? Is there a belief that you're really attached to? Because Jupiter is also belief systems and how we sort of frame our visions for our lives based on those belief systems. So we really want to look at, okay, questioning those things. We're forever questioning our beliefs, some more than others. And I think in Pisces, since Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces, and then Neptune sort of added to that, and we'll talk a little bit about that transit when Jupiter and Neptune form a conjunction later on. But Jupiter in one of his ruling signs, that sort of internal, Pisces is yin, water, right? Yin, mutable water. It's the internal energy of how we are connecting with the all, how we are connecting with truth, but it's inside. So I think we're going to experience a lot of this sort of contrast and comparison, because Pisces is a sign of duality. What is real? What is imagination or fantasy? And where are we getting attached to that? Where have we perhaps been attached to certain illusions? What does it look like when we're sort of dismantling the belief systems that are sort of bolstering our life? And in what way sometimes are illusions helpful? Right? These are all questions that you want to ask yourself. I had somebody really wise say to me once when I was going through a bit of an existential crisis. I was really struggling to find happiness, because a lot of people don't know this about me, but I studied global development before I really came out as an astrologer. So I was very much, in politics and economics and like studying the problems of society. I was South Node Virgoing, looking for the problem so that I could try to be somebody to fix it. And I really took like that scholarly, intellectual, very left-brained approach. And I became severely depressed in that time. And then right around the age of 24, when I was having my second Jupiter return, is when I really decided to just go all in on just living and being the solution in myself, rather than externalizing my work or externalizing my problems or the things that I wanted to fix out in the world. So that was how Jupiter's really sort of inspired me, because I believe that Jupiter is what got me into astrology. I have a Jupiter in my first house, so Jupiter and I am pretty tight. So that's why I'm so passionate about this. But what I noticed in that time was that I had to do a profound amount of disillusionment. And I realized, there are certain beliefs that just don't serve me anymore. But I kind of did this interesting flip into nihilism and not believing in anything. So that's also sometimes what can happen with a strong Jupiter transit, because you're so overwhelmed with all of the different potentials and all the different perspectives and ways of looking at life that you're like, what is real? What is reality? Who can I trust? How am I going to filter truth? Right? These are all Jupiter and Pisces questions. Everybody's going to be asked those questions. And I think depending on the degree that you've asked yourself these kinds of questions before, I think is how you'll sort of be able to handle this now. Because I do think, if we're being honest and looking at the state of the world, this is arguably the most intense time that most of us have been alive. So our beliefs matter now more than ever. And so that's why I chose to focus on Jupiter today. So what somebody said to me was that our beliefs are going to change according to how they serve us and our soul growth. And I really took that to heart. And it helped me to sort of relax my expectations. I had this idea that there would be some sort of right answer. Right? Very South Node Virgo. And if you think about the Jupiter in Pisces is going to call in that opposition point of Virgo pretty strong. There's going to be a little bit of that battle of like, okay, I can accept what is Pisces, but I want to know the right answer, Virgo. Right? There's going to be some of that, and you're probably going to notice that. Jeffrey Wolf Green, in the evolutionary astrology paradigm, he teaches, of course, the Pluto and Pluto polarity point, and then, of course, the North and South Node and the ascendant, descendant. These are some of our core oppositions. And he argues that if you are wanting to take seriously your conscious evolution journey, you should actually look at the oppositions of every single planet and every opposite sign in order to find the balance and the wholeness, and integrate the spectrum of experience that's available in all of these different axes. So conscious evolution is done through integrating opposition. And I've definitely, I know that to be true in my experience. So when we're working with the Jupiter in Pisces, of course, thinking about when he goes retrograde in Aries and then back into Pisces, there will be that emphasis of Virgo, Libra. So we want to consider, okay, these extremes. What would the extreme of Pisces look like? Well, there's a range, right? I guess I don't really want to put a judgment on it, but what you could call negative could be like immense escapism or addiction, right? Like the expansion of some sort of addictive pattern that sort of keeps you limited in your power, or keeps you separated from your higher self, or keeps you in an illusion around your connection with spirit. Those would be what we could consider a dangerous, slippery slope kind of energy of Pisces. And I definitely don't want to demonize anybody in their experience of that, because I know we all have our own reasons, right? Like a lot of times people will get into addictive behaviors for the purpose of self-healing, self-medication, self-numbing, because sometimes the world is really hard. So there's an immense level of compassion for why one might get caught up in the throes of addiction. But at the same time, when you are presented with, oh, there might be a different option, there might be a different way to heal in a way that is more supportive and more conducive to your true higher self goals. Maybe that's something like meditation to connect with spirit rather than a psychedelic drug. Maybe it looks like, oh, I want to feel healthier in my body. Instead of taking this pill, maybe I'm going to, go for a walk every day and spend some time in nature and, commune with the spirits of the trees in that sense, right? Like, so all of those kinds of potentials, they can kind of help get us out of any of the negative or lower vibration, you could say, of the Jupiter and Pisces spectrum. Some of the higher elements of that spectrum would look like really just being tapped in with yourself, being tapped in with truth, being able to hold a frequency of faith and trust and love in whatever that is, right? Like it's non-denominational. Like that's the thing with Pisces. It's different than Sagittarius. Sagittarius has a similar energy of this like faith and truth and belief systems, because Jupiter also rules Sagittarius. But with Sagittarius, the danger can become around like dogma and thinking that there's only like a very limited, narrow pathway of connecting to spirit. Whereas Pisces opens it all up and connects us to the cosmic womb and connects us to all the different ways that there are to connect to spirit. And then using that polarity point of Virgo to stay in discernment, to really be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, to know like this is for me, this is working for me, this is positive for me, this is life-giving, this is supporting my evolution, this is supporting my journey, and this is not. Maybe it's supporting somebody else's journey, but it's not supporting mine, and that's okay. And I think those are the kinds of conversations we're going to see as people are interacting with the spectrum of experience of high vibrational versus low vibrational Pisces energy, and then the inherent duality within that. All of the mutable signs carry very strong this or that, black and white, duality, polarity kind of energy, because they are the signs of communication and understanding truth, and understanding that truth sets you free. And what else is healing, right? Healing is connected to freedom, right? When you're healed in your mind, you feel free to live a joyful life. When you're healed in your body, you're free to move. Like, and all of the connection, like the mind-body connection, is so immensely important when we're considering the mutable cross, the Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius. So wherever you have Pisces in your chart, I think is where you're going to be confronting this duality. And then you're also going to want to look at where you have the opposite sign of Virgo to see how can you keep yourself in check, right? Because sometimes Jupiter, he's going to make things bigger so that you really understand the dynamic, so that you're not necessarily going in blind. Sometimes Jupiter will make something bigger so that you can see it, right? Like the magnification glass. And so maybe there's a pattern locked deep away in your subconscious, because Pisces has that association with the subconscious, that you didn't even know. And I think it's really important too, just before we go through all of the 12 houses, that we look at some of the highest essence of Pisces as really about forgiveness and holding space for the immense beauty and courage and strength that it takes to come here and live a life as a human being on Earth in these bodies at this time, with all of the different options of belief systems out there, all of the different viewpoints. There's a lot going on here. And I think there's a whole range of experiences. And when we try to box it all in, like, oh, there's only one right way to live, we're trying to like standardize things and say, oh, this is the way it's supposed to look. I think we are inherently stomping out the beauty of diversity, which I think Jupiter in Pisces is really going to emulate and help us to see in ourselves, well, how can we stay true to who we are, use our own discernment, be our own truth filters, connect to spirit in the way that is most authentic for us, and still be open and willing to learn from others and other experiences so that we can all grow and evolve together. I really view the Jupiter in Pisces as an opportunity for collective healing. I should say too that in order to really access some of the highest gifts of Jupiter, it requires us to let go of what is not true, what is not authentic, what is not necessary for us on our path right now. And especially in Pisces, having that general energy of surrendering and letting go and acceptance and forgiveness. But all of this, I think, is going to bring an initiation of surrender. So I mentioned a little bit about the houses, but let's go a little deeper. So say you have Jupiter in the first house by transit. So the first house is all about you, your body, your instinctual way of defining your environment and how you move through the world. Jupiter in Pisces there. So if you're a Pisces rising, or maybe you're an Aquarius rising and you've got that Jupiter stepping into Pisces still within your first house, you're looking at making your whole way of intuiting your next step, how you're walking through life. You're increasing that tenfold. There's going to be this exponential growth in physical body awareness that can look a lot of different ways. That can look like heightened physical sensitivity, maybe to, electromagnetic fields, because Pisces also has that association with the aura and with energy that we don't see, right? But you kind of, until you're proven, scientifically, you have to believe that it's there. So really honoring and listening to your body. When your body tells you that something is right for you and your body tells you something is not right for you, when and how do you listen to that information? What's the story with the other planets in your chart that are maybe being expanded by aspect with Jupiter moving through your first house? And this can look a lot of different ways. So say, for example, it's in your first house and you are needing to make some sort of shift in the way you're eating for the sake of your health. We could talk about coffee. I think a lot of people struggle with coffee, releasing coffee from their lives. And I definitely have not done my own studies on, the true deepest effects of coffee, but I do know that people have reported various levels of this being, supportive for them versus not, right? A lot of people try to get off coffee, so I'll just use it as a very neutral example. Say for you, you've discovered coffee's not working for you, and it's probably going to pull up a lot of those feelings of attachment, right? Because we tend to have these sort of power connections with these drinks or with these foods or maybe with other substances that we feel like, oh, when I partake in this substance, I am improved, or I feel my power, or I just feel better. And then we start to rely on something external outside of us to give us that feeling that we really want and need. So that's obviously pulling in that polarity of the seventh house, something outside of you to give you what you need inside yourself, first house. So what that might feel like with Jupiter and Pisces in the first house is needing to make a sacrifice for your own health, right? And at first that can be really difficult, right? When you're releasing something physically from your life, like a habit or an addiction or something that you're really attached to, but it's actually not serving you in the long run or even in the short run. That sacrifice can feel really hard. But afterwards, you start to receive the gift, which is what Jupiter promises, the gift of perhaps having higher energy and being able to source it yourself, or source it through foods that don't have like a negative payoff. Say if you get like migraines or headaches, or if coffee creates an overly acidic pH in your body, right? Like there's a whole bunch of reasons, and you could apply this to anything. If it's creating a more difficult day for you tomorrow, is probably a bad habit. And I say that with love. I've definitely worked through a lot of those myself. Okay, so if we're looking at Jupiter in the second house, the second house ranges from, understanding your own sense of value, self-worth, self-esteem, but also your finances, your money. Could be real estate, could be your possessions, right? The things that you have that support you to live the life that you came here to live your mission. Jupiter and Pisces there. I heard it said once that Neptune in the second house is often connected to people who are able to make a lot of money because the work that they're doing is really supporting a vast number of people. So I would liken that Jupiter and Pisces to a slightly similar energy, where it's like if you're investing in the well-being of all, you're likely to receive what you need doing that kind of work. And it's also, I don't think it's always a guarantee, like, oh, if Jupiter's passing through your second house, that means you're just going to like win the lottery, although maybe you will. I hope you do. That would be great for you. But if you put in the effort, if you put the work into dismantling any limiting beliefs around money, you very well might see a massive influx of support around money coming maybe a little bit easier in the second house. Alternatively, if you've got some sort of issue around money, Jupiter's just going to make it bigger so that you can make the changes necessary. And then still with that sense of faith and trust, if you're letting go of whatever habits or patterns or dynamics that are actually challenging you and your resources, it's very likely that you will receive some sort of benefit or reward if you're willing to surrender the habits or the dynamics that are not working for you. So if it's a great thing, it's going to get better. If it's a not so great thing, it might feel like it gets worse for a little while until you release what's not serving you, and then it'll get better. So in the end, it all gets better. Hopefully all of you with Jupiter transiting through your second house are able to really, really take that advice and run with it, and hopefully not feel any fear. Because that's the thing with Jupiter, we don't want to be afraid of having to make these changes. I think we just want to welcome them and trust. The trust and the faith, I think, are everything, especially in Pisces. Trust that you're supported. Trust that you came here for a reason. Trust that you chose all the challenges and obstacles and people in your life and stories to live out so that you could learn lessons and grow and evolve. I imagine if you're watching this, you already feel that and believe that, but just in case anybody needed to hear that, because I know that money is a real thing, especially in our current cultural climate where there's a lot of stress in that area for a lot of people. Okay, so if we're working on Jupiter passing through the third house, we're looking at communication, perhaps relationships with your siblings, how we communicate to get our needs met, things we're learning about, sort of how we're classifying and categorizing our life experiences. So Pisces in the third house has often been connected to being able to channel or being able to just like know information without knowing. I can remember the friends that I had in elementary school, for example, who were like really good at getting the answer in math, but like really bad at like showing their work, and then they would like lose points because they didn't show their work, but they got the right answer. So the teacher would always wonder like, how are you doing that? I feel like that's Pisces in the third house. It's like you just know, or also Scorpio in the third house sometimes. You just know the answer, and then you have to like go back and like try to like grasp for your left brain and like organize it all out. But sometimes, you know, the Jupiter and Pisces in the third house is just going to know. Just going to know the answer. You're just going to know things. And then you're going to be able to communicate that with other people in order to support yourself. And it tends to have the benefit of supporting others as well, because the third house does have that correspondence with the art of relating and how to communicate about what you need, your needs, which is fundamental to long-lasting, thriving relationships in every sort of case scenario. So then Jupiter transiting through your fourth house in Pisces, well, this is bringing everything home. really connecting to your ancestral lineage, the roots of your chart, and how that is then going to influence the fruits of your life, right? With that opposite 10th house. I would imagine with Jupiter and Pisces, you're probably going to expand your understanding of self, and perhaps also expand a little bit more your abilities around emotional intelligence, emotional processing, and everything to do with really looking at what kind of legacy you've already been passed down from your family. So sometimes there's a need to kind of go back and do some ancestral healing and clearing, but also this sort of mining, like the gold mine of your family, of your lineage, and also the stories of your childhood. So Jupiter and Pisces in the 4th house might be asking you to look at, okay, where's your inner child in all of this? Is there something that you need to reclaim from your childhood or from your memories? Or you might just feel very nostalgic and like you're remembering a lot of beautiful times from your childhood. And then you're noticing, oh, wow, there's these like timeless truths in there. Wow, I was so wise when I was a kid. Like go back and look at your old journals if you have them. Look at old pictures and just notice like, wow, this young person knew things. It can be really beautiful to go back and sort of soak in the wisdom nuggets that you've already mastered in your life so far. So then when you move Jupiter in Pisces in the 5th house, well, the 5th house being your sense of expression and how you feel able to express. Is there sort of like a dampening on your ability to self-express, or do you feel really supported in that sense? A lot of times you can look back to the time of your high school days and like notice, okay, was I supported to be who I was, or was I told to not be who I was, right? Were you rewarded or punished for being who you are? And I think that's going to sort of augment your relationship to the 5th house in general. So Jupiter and Pisces in the 5th house, this is a really great time if you're already riding high on that, creative expression journey. Take this and run with it, because chances are you will create something that is really meaningful for you, the people around you, for your life. It can also be really great for sort of having more fun, romantic relationships, and kind of dispelling the untruths that are around that. Because remember, the Jupiter in Pisces is going to be asking us to surrender and let go of ideas and ideologies that don't serve us. So this can be a really great time to practice, I guess positive focus is a way you could say it, and really noticing that what you do focus on does expand, and then you can create so much from that space. And if you look at that opposite point of the 5th house, which is all about the personal expression and the gifts that you're really honing and working on for yourself and what you're really passionate about and what you're really good at, how that will naturally flow into the 11th house, which is about sharing those gifts with society and sort of, growing together with the positive gifts that, we're all bringing together. And it just expands in that sense. So never feel bad to spend time working on your own creative passions and your own creative projects, especially if you have Jupiter moving through there, because you'll be very rewarded for that. And I think, again, thinking about what you might have to surrender, I think a lot of times it's just guilt, shame, doubt, the feeling of not enoughness, or any sort of attachments or beliefs around, is it important for you to create or not, or, understanding your creative power. So then when we move into Jupiter and Pisces transiting through your 6th house, this is the house of daily work, service, physical health as well, and sort of how do we maintain and sort of keep ourselves sort of grounded and in a healthy flow on the daily, so that we can continue to show up and do the work that we came here to do. And so Jupiter there is going to show you all sorts of dynamics around your habits, your patterns, perhaps your eating, right? You definitely want to be very, Jupiter's going to magnify your diet, your nutrition, your exercise, what's serving you, what's not so much serving you. And then you'll want to, it's a good time to write down, okay, well, what am I eating, and how am I noticing the effect, and what's the connection of, mind, gut, especially in the sixth house, if there's a sort of an underlying sensitivity, say like an underlying stomach sensitivity, and it just shows up every once in a while, but you kind of ignore it because it's gone in an hour. Sometimes with Jupiter, he's going to make that situation bigger. So maybe it's something that was there all along, but you kind of overlooked it. But now you're not going to be able to overlook it so that you can really understand what's going on there, understand the dynamics, understand the mind-body connection there, and how your habits or maybe tweaking certain things about your diet or your everyday lifestyle could make a huge difference in your overall health. And so I think we really need to thank Jupiter and whatever he magnifies for really giving us just a clearer lens to look at our life through, so that we can really make the changes that we need and just live the best life that we came here to live and serve in the way that we came here to serve, right? So why do we focus so much on health in the sixth house? Well, if we're feeling healthy, strong, alive, vibrant, we're so able to give that and share that joyfully, meaningfully out in the world. And if we think of that opposite 12th house, it's like public service, spiritual connection. In the sixth house, I think we're really trying to find the sacred in the ordinary. So if you have Jupiter transiting in Pisces through your seventh house, this is going to expand all things relationship. So all things around contrasting values, all things around, are you in any sort of codependence? Are you projecting onto other people that which would be actually very beneficial for you yourself to really own? And then alternatively, the Jupiter in the seventh house can just be a really good time to, make business deals, connect with people who are, of a like mind, or people that you can do some sort of real service with. So especially if you have Pisces on the seventh house cusp and you're Virgo rising, you know that so much of your life is about being of service to others. And then in Pisces, seventh house, sometimes that looks like having to keep healthy boundaries. It's like the duality of like, sometimes you're going to meet people and they're going to be really wonderful, and then you're going to like spend time with them and you start to become them a little bit. That's what tends to happen with Pisces in the seventh house. It's like, oh, you didn't even like hockey until you started dating this person, and now you're like a hockey fan. Sometimes that happens with Pisces in the seventh house. I know somebody who came to mind when I said that example. But alternatively, you could see how that could also manifest in a not so desirable way, right? What if you connect with somebody and maybe there's some sort of magnetism there, which is why you connected with them, but then they sort of lured you into some sort of illusion or fantasy, right? Jupiter can also expose that, make that bigger, and kind of show you the things that are really working, the things that are really not working, and then kind of bring you back into yourself to question, okay, well, why am I in this relationship? What are my beliefs about this relationship? Right, the beliefs, Jupiter. And then in Pisces, I think it would also be a very good time to sort of release and surrender anywhere that you have sort of lingering karmic residue with people. Could be a really good time to just do the final clean sweep of forgiveness. That's how we really cut cords, right? If you like cut a cord, but then you still hate somebody, you haven't cut the cord. It doesn't really work like that. So the Pisces energy is going to come in and do that final clean sweep. It's like a huge tidal wave that just comes and cleans everything, and then comes back into itself, and you'll find calm after that. And so sometimes Jupiter in the seventh house, it can just illuminate dynamics that, especially in Pisces, that maybe you've wanted to stay in a fantasy, but you won't really be able to stay in something that's really not serving you for very long. If you are in a loving, committed relationship and it's all feeling great, then it could be a really wonderful time to choose to create goals together. And then note, okay, in both charts, what's the story, and how are the goals really coming together when you combine both. So for somebody with experiencing the Jupiter and Pisces transit through their eighth house is mystery, connecting with your soul, connecting with your power, your sovereignty, your ability to share resources and share karma, share dharma, pool resources together, but without losing yourself. It's very interesting, the eighth house. I think there's also a correspondence with boundaries in the eighth house as well, because when you're talking about what is most sacred to you, you're not just going to give that away to anybody. So there is a carefulness, a cautiousness when it comes to the eighth house in general. And it's really a place where you learn so much about who you really are, because you're entering that soul cave. So if you are a being who has Pisces in your eighth house, I know you've been doing this work for your whole life. So you don't really need me to tell you that that's a deep place of a lot of feeling. Sometimes the eighth house can hold relational trauma. So this could be a really good time with Jupiter in the eighth house to find a guide, find a mentor, find a therapist, a counselor, somebody who can really help you work through those things. Maybe you are the guide, the therapist, the counselor with, the Pisces in the eighth house, and depending on what else might be going on there. Really good time to explore any patterns of escapism, addiction, and how they are sort of caught up with relationship dynamics, or where you might be giving your power away and where you can reclaim what is rightfully yours and really step into your true power. So the Jupiter in Pisces may be asking to really deepen that forgiveness work, deepen the compassion work. And I really do view anybody who's, been in something really challenging around some sort of relational trauma or a transgression of boundaries, not having, a consensual sexual experience, for example, how far forgiveness goes in terms of healing. And it's not to say that there's ever like a pardoning of somebody who's done some sort of transgression, but for you to, in yourself, be able to completely let go. Pisces, I think, is really underestimated in terms of how difficult it actually can be to completely let go, to completely forgive, because it's not something that you just do one time. It's an ongoing process. Every day you have to choose to get into the energy of forgiveness, compassion, and love. You don't just like choose that once and then like go back to life, never thinking about it again. So really showing up with that grit, that tenacity, that choice of like, I really do want to live in my highest clarity. So I'm going to choose to process all of these emotions. And it's not because the other person is, a saint and I just think they're so awesome. It's because I love myself that much that I'm going to claim my power back. And that requires me to completely forgive and let go of this other person or this dynamic or whatever it is, to fully heal. I actually, on my wall, I have a mantra that has been really supportive for me. And because I have my North Node in Pisces, I'm working on this forgiveness, compassion work for life, friends. So it says, healing is the end of conflict with yourself. And whenever I really tune into that, I feel the resonance of that so profoundly. It was another astrologer, Stephanie Gailing, I think her name is, that said that. So healing is the end of conflict with yourself. So in any case scenario where forgiveness is called upon with this Jupiter in Pisces, just remembering that it's all coming back to you, and it's all coming back to your ability to connect with the wholeness of you, to reintegrate yourself for any of those pieces that got lost along the way due to overwhelm, due to, being trapped in a life that you don't want to live, or being trapped in a relationship that is not conducive to you living in your power, right? So these are all the kinds of things that you might confront in the eighth house. Okay. And I think actually that last bit that I said, that could apply to everybody. Okay. So Jupiter transiting through your ninth house. Ninth house being your beliefs, how you're looking at the world, your perceptions, and truth, and perhaps religion, perhaps your ideas around, philosophy, morality, ethics, all of these kinds of things. And so whenever I'm thinking of the ninth house, I'm thinking this is like their philosopher style. Like this is what they're going to focus on if you're, talking to them about, what's going on in the world. So Pisces in the ninth house, Jupiter transiting through there is, probably a really good time to call in that philosopher. If you're, already engaged in that kind of work, it could be, if you're a teacher, or if you're somebody who does spiritual work, you might feel this sort of expansion into that role, and then learning to navigate all of the ins and outs of truth and like vision, and like questioning everything, questioning all of the different paradigms of truth, and sort of getting this sort of theistic, if that's even what we would call it, right? Because it might not be necessarily theistic, but just sort of this looking at all that is, looking at all the different ways, all the different beliefs, all the things that people use to shape their reality, their vision, and how they experience and believe reality to be. So that would be the Jupiter in the 9th house in Pisces. Very expansive. If you have a very strong vision, it might become even stronger. And then, of course, you would be taking that into the 10th house next year in Aries. So, okay, if somebody has Jupiter transiting in Pisces in their 10th house, this is all things career, contribution to society. Chances are, if you have Pisces in the 10th house or in your midheaven, you are definitely here to do a lot of big compassion work, big forgiveness, big surrender. Having Jupiter there is going to perhaps make it public. People might start to see you more for that part of you, if they don't already, because usually we're very seen for our midheaven, for our 10th house. It tends to be, especially like in the public sense, like is what you're putting out. So to have Jupiter there, I think, is actually very supportive for you in what you're putting out, because people are going to need what you have. So if you have Jupiter high up in your chart, this is a really good time to share and teach about loving kindness, compassion, forgiveness, surrender, sacrifice, navigating duality, integrating opposites, all of the above. And perhaps, releasing addictions, releasing any tendency to escapism, and all of those things. So that might be just more prominent in the work that you're doing out in the world, whether or not it's your job title, right? But that's just who you are out in the world. And so if you have Jupiter in Pisces transiting through your 11th house, this is me. So I'm going to have this on my North Node. I'm very, I'm like anxious, excited, because I feel the pressure of the planetary ruler on the North Node. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to have to do here to really step into this? But everything to do with your community, everything to do with your tribe, the people that you are connected with, the people that you serve. I think working through forgiveness of different groups of people that maybe you do agree with, you don't agree with. We've seen a lot of polarization in terms of like tribes and groups, and then noticing all of the different ways that you can co-create with different groups of people. So I could give a personal example, something that I've sort of noticed already, even with that tiny dip of Jupiter into Pisces in 2021, is that I started to get exposed to very different communities than I've ever been exposed to, and it really expanded my vision. I feel like what I know about reality and what I think is happening here in this world is dramatically different, having Jupiter just having dipped into my 11th house and then back into my 10th. So for me, I've really noticed that, wow, the people that I connect with are going to pull out a different facet for me to work and do my own healing, forgiveness, compassion work. And so that's what I think is really going on in the 11th house. And then Jupiter and Pisces in the 12th house. This is like where we get that nice double signature energy, because Pisces has that natural affinity with the 12th house. So this is, I think, the ultimate coming full circle to life, work, healing, integration. You might be looking at past lives. You might want to do like regression work or quantum healing therapy, anything that's going to help you look at the big picture, like the biggest picture of your life. And you might find your work takes on a very public service or spiritual service energy, a lot of just showing up and not necessarily knowing what you're going to need to be doing, but you just show up because you know who you serve. You serve your higher self, you serve God, Goddess, whatever is your way of describing that, but you know what you're here to do. And so a lot of people who have natally Jupiter in the 12th house, I notice, are very psychic, very tapped in, and very clear, actually, on their mission in life, which is very, very fascinating. So I think having Jupiter transit through your 12th house, it can sort of expand the energy of your subconscious patterning if you have any block towards, connecting with your higher self, to kind of get that out of the way. But to be able to actually connect so profoundly with your higher self that there becomes no question around the spiritual work that you're here doing, and then how that will manifest in the outer world. So I think really exciting if you have Jupiter transiting in Pisces in your 12th house. Okay, so we talked about who he is, what he does, the houses, where he does it. And so I'd really love to spend a little bit of time going through the core transits of Jupiter next year. So this is when he does it. And this can be really supportive for goal setting. So I guess before we dive into that fully, with what you know now about where Jupiter is transiting through your chart, well, kind of look back. You can look back just to this past year. How has perhaps the Aquarius energy in your life been expanded, and how have you integrated that and interacted with your new sense of vision, your new consciousness expansion in that area? And then now you can look ahead and say, okay, it's going to this next area. Maybe you have, like half of one sign in a house and then half of another sign in that same house. And you've already been working with that same house, but now it's going to switch into a different energy. Kind of looking at, okay, well, how can I change hats, right? Because the planets in the different signs, it's like changing their different costumes, their different outfits, right? So shifting from Aquarius, like maybe the computer is like, now you bring out your hula hoop with the Pisces. I don't know, just being silly, trying to have fun here. But, just switch up the costume, switch up the setting just slightly with Pisces, and see what kind of goals would come from that. And also a Jupiter strategy for goal setting is have the knowledge of where Jupiter is in your chart, and then think think your vision and what you would like to see in that area, but then also kind of let it go, and then go outside and go for a walk and connect with nature, natural law, right? That Jupiter, and feel into your spirit, because sometimes with Jupiter, it's just not all in the mind. We want to give space for our higher mind to sort of be able to download into us what we need to know in order to set these goals. So let it be, more than just like a left brain journaling process is all I'm saying to come up with these goals. Okay, so core transits of Jupiter. Jupiter enters Pisces right at the end of the year in 2021. So December 28th, he'll enter Pisces. This is actually, I think, a great time to be tuning into the strategies for the year ahead, because we're already in that sort of vibration of new year, new me, new ways I'm expanding. And so the energy of change will already be very present. Something I think will be really important is just at that beginning of the year, the North and South Node will still be North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sagittarius, and that South Node in Sagittarius has the planetary rulership of Jupiter. And so Jupiter in Pisces, that planetary ruler of that South Node, will be square the nodes, January 3rd. And so I think around that time, we're going to get this nice sweet spot of really working with the energy of, 3 points of that mutable square, the Gemini, Sagittarius, and then the Pisces, to be able to really understand more of our truth and more of how our goals are going to be influenced by the information that we have. And with that North Node in Gemini having been prompting us to ask different questions to kind of get new information, I think that would be a really potent time for really working out the different extremes of information and coming into that place where you're using your intuition, Pisces, to discern and connecting with truth and faith, and sort of surrendering the ego in order to understand what is true and what is real. So I think that is going to be really strong at the beginning of the year when Jupiter does this square with the nodes. He'll be doing quite a few semi-squares and semi-sextiles with the outer planets, but I'm not going to go into those. I'm just going to stick to predominantly the major aspects. So February 17th, Jupiter will, from Pisces at 11 degrees Pisces, he will sextile Uranus at 11 degrees Taurus. And so the Jupiter and Uranus sextile, I think, is going to bring a lot of opportunity to expand how we're using our resources and our belief systems, Jupiter and Pisces, around how we use technology, Uranus, or how we progress into the future, Uranus, or how we liberate certain systems, Uranus, but around our values. So perhaps money, our economic system, our food systems, all of these things. And seeing the sextiles are great energy for taking action around important goals and seeing that, okay, we might actually have to do something. It's not just going to happen, but we have to do something. And as long as we're staying true to our core values, our core beliefs, we can see some sort of positive shifting around how we are using resources. And so since these are also collective planets, we get to see what is our relationship with these collective changes and how do our belief systems influence these collective changes, because sometimes I think it's easy to sort of separate ourselves out from the collective and think it's like a us versus them thing, but really we're part of it. We're all part of it. We're all one, and we all have equal agency and a voice and equal influence in terms of how the tides shift, right? Like Pisces, you might feel like a drop of the ocean, but that drop matters, and you can start to see how you can influence the changing tides for the future with that Jupiter sextile Uranus, February 17th. Then Pisces season, of course, will be, I think, lovely, having the light of the sun shine on Jupiter in Pisces. That's going to happen March 5th. And I think with that energy, we will see a lot more clarity around what this Jupiter and Pisces energy is really doing. So sometimes, we can set goals and we don't really, when we're setting them, we haven't quite received all of the necessary downloads yet to know what to do and how to do it. But I think during our Pisces season, especially when the sun is conjunct Jupiter, I think there will be more clarity around purpose, around how to really take action, very clear action on these goals. Because remember, it's a year-long transit. So I think having gentleness combined with tenacity, but of course, an appreciation that these things are not just going to happen overnight. So whatever goals you have, being willing to do that sort of consistent connecting in to your higher self. And I think the solar season with the sun in Pisces will be really supportive for that in general. Then we are going to have Jupiter in Pisces sextile the North Node, who will by this time be in Taurus. So again, sextiles being really great opportunities for moving forward. So having the Jupiter sextile the North Node in Taurus is also going to therefore be trine the South Node in Scorpio. So this will be a nice energy to help us to easily recognize the gifts of that South Node in Scorpio while we take positive action to perhaps creating healthy habits, healthy routines with the North Node in Taurus. We will, in that same month, in April's going to be a big Jupiter month. Jupiter is going to conjunct Neptune at 23 degrees 59 minutes Pisces. And so this one, I think, is going to be massively felt. Neptune, also the current planetary ruler of Pisces, Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, both of them coming together in a conjunction is going to shake the foundations, I think, of what we've been working through in our belief systems. Something that I've really noticed over these past couple years is just how many people have sort of ripped up the carpets and of their belief systems and have been like scouring everything and questioning everything about what they believe. And this has been this sort of back and forth of like nihilism, not believing anything matters, sort of giving up in like sort of the lower sense of surrender, like the giving up energy, the quitting energy, just like moving through life almost like a zombie, compared to the alternative to that is immense empowerment and feeling connected and one with life and trusting the processes of life. So I think this Jupiter conjunct Neptune will be when we see the beginning of a whole new cycle in that sense. And if you think about it, we have similar Jupiter transits around every 12 years, because it takes him about 11.86 years to go through all of the signs. So if you even look at what was going on for you about 12 years ago when Jupiter was in Pisces, you'll probably get some solid information around how you dealt with the expansion of this, emotional, spiritual energy in your life, and how that changed your life. And so I think it will be exponentially true with this Jupiter conjunct Neptune. And you're really going to be looking at, how do you dissolve everything that's in the way of you and your connection with your higher self, you and your connection with spirit, you and your connection with greater truths than our minds can even comprehend, I think, with that Neptune in Pisces. Then May 3rd, we will have Jupiter 28 degrees 36 minutes Pisces sextile Pluto 28 degrees 36 Capricorn. And so Pluto, as we know, has really been inviting us into literally shaking the foundations of our societal structures. In the United States, we're working through like a Pluto return time. So there's a lot of energy around, just completely dismantling the structures that we have come to know and have come to feel comfortable with, and everything that we've been educated around as well. I think the Jupiter having that correlation to the education system might be helping us to rewire the education system, sort of tear it all down, but then be able to build it back up in a way that's more conducive to the whole, and sort of releasing and purging the darkness that has sort of infiltrated certain systems, certain ideologies of, there's this leader or this, hierarchical structure that is very oppressive, that is, sort of the underbelly of the Pluto and Capricorn, that sort of had its thumb over everybody, and then therefore it all filters down through the education system. So I think that Jupiter sextile Pluto in May, we're going to see something around in the education systems that will kind of help us to actually open up more, rather than being so confined and so limited to like the agenda of a certain few. I think it's going to open up around this time. And then just a week later, May 10th, Jupiter will enter Aries. And so this is going to be, I think, a nice time to see a new spark, because Aries is that spark of, the divine creativity. And it might feel like, okay, I can move forward with what I've been integrating and forgiving and healing for the first 5 months or 4 months of 2022. And then May, and really up until October 27th, when Jupiter retrograde re-enters Pisces, we're going to get this nice 6-month chunk, or can I do math? May, June, July, October, 4 months. 4 months time of Jupiter in Aries, where we might see sort of more light entering our belief systems, more ability to instinctually act from a place of conscious self-awareness, having been sort of fueled by the healing work that we've done up until then with Jupiter in Pisces. And so we might feel more light and more of that ability to move forward, sort of like the light that's sort of the calm after the storm, like the beautiful reassurance that the sun always rises type of energy. And then we're going to have Jupiter retrograde going back into Pisces October 27th. And then Jupiter will station direct November 23rd at 28 degrees, 48 minutes Pisces. And then he will officially enter Aries December 20th. Okay, so with all of those transits and feeling into what that is doing in your chart, hopefully this is able to give you a little bit more information on where in your life you can put some energy into, some real intention and focus to set some goals, goals with soul, right? That's what I often correlate with Jupiter. It's setting goals with soul. It's making sure that what you're doing in your life is actually in integrity with your core beliefs. And then when you have to challenge those beliefs, that you're able to see the big picture with Jupiter and Pisces. See how you can know truth without somebody outside needing to validate that for you, or somebody externally needing to tell you what you should believe. Because remember, the Jupiter in Pisces it's an internal experience. You can connect with God, Goddess yourself. And I think the sort of illusions that we've been taught from the time that we're young is that we're supposed to seek that outside of ourselves. I think in Pisces, we're going to have this experience where we do start to see that we are very powerful spiritual beings, and that we really came here on purpose, and that in order to live a sovereign life, we need to be able to let go of all of the illusion. We need to be able to clear out the lies. We need to be able to find a sense of clarity, calm, and serenity in ourselves. Forgive ourselves for all the things that we did when we were in an unconscious place. And now that we are elevating in our consciousness, we just start to make different decisions from a place of conscious reverence for life, for what we came to do here, and to serve truth and to serve love. Okay, thank you all so much for tuning in and sharing this time with me. If you have any questions about working with Jupiter in your own charts, creating goals with soul, definitely please reach out to me. I'm at nurarachelle.com. Thank you so much for the evolutionary astrology community. I absolutely adore you. And until next time, okay, bye.